Hey everyone, this is Bethany Meadows. In today's episode, we're excited to welcome Heather Parady, a creative visionary and fractional COO who specializes in helping unconventional leaders turn their big ideas into impactful ventures. As the host of a popular podcast that highlights out-of-the-box thinkers, Heather dives deep into the challenges and breakthroughs of entrepreneurship. Today, she will share insights on breaking internal barriers, transforming creativity into action, and the key qualities every visionary leader needs to thrive. Let's dive into Heather's wisdom on leading with purpose and making your ideas a reality. Welcome to the show, Heather.
Thanks for having me, Bethany.
All right, like with every episode, we have our random questions 1 through 5. So I need you to pick a number.
3.
3, right in the middle. What do you keep on your desk or workspace area that boosts your mood?
Flowers. I buy myself flowers all the time. I buy myself a bouquet of flowers for me. I sure do.
I love that. I love that. Like, if you're with someone who's just not a flower person, who doesn't think to do those things, do it for yourself. Do what gives you joy, right?
That's it.
So, and you describe yourself as a fractional COO. What does that mean? And how do you bring that role to creative entrepreneurs? And what impact does it have on their business operations?
Yeah, we work with visionaries. I'm kind of cursed and blessed with a visionary integrator personality where I see the big vision. I have big ideas, but I also carry things across finish lines. I used to be a therapist and I thought I was leaving the therapy world when I came into the entrepreneurial space. And now I just realize that I'm just using it in a different way because there's a lot of like technical how-tos, like what's the process and what's the strategy and all that. But a lot of folks find themselves where they're buying a ton of courses, hiring a bunch of coaches and still not doing anything with it. And so we come alongside them from a internal perspective and also an external one. Do you need external help? Absolutely. But we're also going to walk with you in the internal process because at the end of the day, if you don't hit publish, that's really the make or break. So we work with a variety of folks, but the underlying theme of all of them is they're bent a little bit differently. They're trying to break the mold in their industry and they have something really powerful to share. So we lock arms with them and take their projects across the finish line.
Something very common with visionaries is they are big idea people, right?
Totally.
Like throwing ideas left and right. The details of putting that into action isn't always an equal skill.
Totally.
So what are some other common internal barriers that you see in visionary entrepreneurs that kind of hold them back, and how can they overcome those?
They're saying they want things to be done the right way and they want this to be successful. You can't reverse engineer perfect success and perfect launches. At some point, you have to make your best educated guess, collect data, and then refine it and try again. It's a cyclical process, launching anything and getting anything off the ground. You know this through podcasting. You don't come up with an idea and then execute a perfect plan and it works out perfectly. That's no one's success story. What happens is iterations. So you put something out the door, you do your absolute very best, and part of it will fail. And folks don't like hearing that. They think if they pay another few $1,000, somebody's going to be able to just give them an answer. If that were the case, we would all have hired that person and that strategy and be implementing it ourselves. The reason in this interviewing so many different people, everybody has such different paths, is that energetically, tactically, we're all so different. And so what may work really well with you, Bethany, may not work with me and vice versa. And so what we have to do is learn as much as we can, listen to that internal guidance system, and then put something out there. Not so it will succeed, but so we'll get data back, which are clues, so we can adjust, pivot, and then try again. And guess what? That second attempt, it's still not going to be it. It's just the folks who are successful and actually, quote, doing things are the ones who are comfortable with this cyclical process. And they're not stuck in this mentality of this linear success path. And really, it just comes back down to fear. What is Bethany going to think of me? I don't want to screw up out loud. I don't want to be a beginner out loud. And it's the cold, hard truth. No one is paying attention to you. No one is noticing. And when you really get into it, that's the crappy part, because when you do find something that works, then it's, okay, how do I get all these people to pay attention to me? And then you realize that nobody's watching. So I think, it's called, I think, the spotlight effect in psychology, where we think that the spotlight is on us and really no one's watching, no one's paying attention. Visionaries have a hard time with that, though.
Yeah. The imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Because anytime you're growing, you're stepping out of your comfort zone and you're getting into things that, you're not 100% on yet.
Yeah.
And so it is a process to get there. It's funny. I posted we have a Facebook group for small business owners, and I saw this little video. Wasn't related to business, but it was the cutest little video of a boy riding a bike, and he fell. Like, and then he got up and did a little dance.
Mm,
I had posted it over on the Facebook group to say, failure isn't failure. It's just the next step to your
that's it.
success. So get up and groove. Right.
That's it. That's it.
And so I love that.
You want another one?
Yeah.
Not trusting people and blaming other people for the failures of stuff. So I've seen a common thing where there's this anger, this resentment, this mistrust because a previous person they worked with, or a previous coach, or a previous partner, or whatever, and they don't feel very trusting of people. They're people who, will take advantage of you, so forth. But I think radical responsibility is so important for visionaries, because what they'll do is they'll say, and this isn't like crapping on them, I'm a visionary too, and I get it, but it's, oh, I'm not a detail person. You handle that. We're responsible as leaders to take ownership of this stuff. And I'm not saying you need to go in and have your hand in everything and micromanage, but you do need to take responsibility to understand and learn the process so you can make informed, educated decisions and also be a better leader for the people who are working for you. So folks will say, I don't know, just get it done, whatever, whatever. And then when it doesn't go their way, they're like, oh, that person. No, man. At the end of the day, we're the leaders, and you have to take ownership of your own vision. So getting in the weeds and just having a basic understanding of the ins and outs is so important. Yeah, there will be some bad apples in there, but it still always falls back on you if it's your vision.
Right. I had a client actually not too long ago, and they're a fairly new client within the last couple of months. And they're a company that has produced a ton of content, but not necessarily executed the marketing for the content.
Yeah.
So they feel like they're doing a lot, but it's not getting to people.
The creation
cycle. I came along, and I'm like, we need to completely shift our mindset now off of continuing to produce content. That's great. You have so much of it. Now we need to get it out to people. So sometimes I think leaders will stay in what they're comfortable.
Totally.
They're passionate about, like in this case, passionate about creating this content that's helping people, right? But it's not helping anyone if no one knows it's there.
Exactly.
And the marketing side was like the less comfortable side. So that's for me, that's a good example. Do you have another example of like a creative leader who successfully turned maybe an unconventional idea into a business that you've worked with?
Oh my gosh, so many.
And there's so many, it's hard to think of just one.
An example of an unconventional leader who took an idea and turned it into a business. I have a real estate agent right now who teaches residential realtors how to transact commercial real estate. In that world, they say, no, you cannot do that. You have to pick one lane or the other. And he's whatever, here you go. I work with who teaches hospitality. So you're thinking of a dentist who teaches hospitality. Isn't that interesting? But he swears that's the most important part of running a successful business. I have a chiropractor who talks about how partners should talk to each other when one of them's expecting, and going into the relationship side of this stuff. So these are folks who are in a certain professional industry, but they're tackling more of the, no, you can't talk about that, or more of the human relation side to things. They're seen as the rebels in their industry.
What's that one big quality that every unconventional leader must possess? I like the word unconventional leader because everybody claims to be a leader. Like if you go to bit, I'm a leader. I'm a leader. But an unconventional leader is somebody who's like stepping out of the norm, out of the box, and maybe carving a path that's different, that maybe hasn't been taken before. Oh, what's the qualities of that person? What does it take to be that?
When I started the show, it was about 5 years ago. We're in a kind of new iteration of it. I have another backlog with 500 episodes on it from 5 years ago. It was crazy. Unconventional Leaders, like round one. And when I first started it, it was because I didn't aesthetically see leaders that had a lot of diversity in them. They were usually a bunch of rich, middle-aged white dudes on a stage with a tie talking about sales and millions of dollars. I didn't see Black teenager who came from whatever background and is now selling his music, talking about mental health. I didn't see someone without legs or someone who wasn't articulate and maybe had tattoos all over them and whatever. Like, I just didn't see a lot of diversity. And it really bothered me because I was in my early 30s, not a buttoned up girl, not a millionaire, but I really loved leadership and I loved the subject of self-help and this idea that you can change your narrative and change your story. And the people who had impacted me the most were not the people on the stage who looked a certain way. They were people who were in the weeds and the dirt with folks and doing the real hard work, and they weren't celebrated as much. So the original intention of this show came from an aesthetic unconventional. Like, you're unconventional, you don't look like a leader. But as the years have gone by and I've talked to more and more people, I've figured out that being unconventional is more of an internal position in this world and the way that you look at things. And it's not something that's celebrated. It's something that's actually really hard. Always like getting the cheers of the crowd. It's not getting the accolades or the awards, but it's people who are driven by usually their own story, usually something with deep pain and deep wounds. And I call them old souls. They're people who believe in something mystical and bigger and that there's a calling on their life. And not everybody agrees with them, but they're just bent a little bit different in the world.
And we see big examples of that, like Elon Musk and the more obvious ones. You just drive to a beat of a different drum and see things that we don't necessarily see. They have a vision for something. What do you have steps or strategies that you recommend for turning that initial vision into actionable steps to move it forward? We touched on it earlier about how visionaries have the big ideas, but don't necessarily take the steps that are needed in the detail. Is there some strategies that people can use I have a big idea, but I don't know what to do with it?
Yeah. So I just was at a retreat with Elizabeth Gilbert this past weekend. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love, one of the biggest books of all time, but she later on came out with a book called Big Magic, which was really her creative process and how people can get in tune with creativity and ideas and actually execute on them. She's brilliant. And one of the things she talked about this weekend was our inner guidance system and getting better at asking not what is the vision for my life and the plan and the strategy and all that, but getting very micro with it of what is the next step for me right now. So what is the thing in my hand right now that I can do? And people don't like this because they're like, okay, yeah, but what about tomorrow? And what about next Thursday? And what about the end of the year? But the thing is, it's a very mystical process. It really is, where in the Bible, it talks about you are a light in my feet and a lamp into my path. It's such a beautiful example of you don't know the steps ahead of you until you take a step forward and that light goes a little further and that light goes a little bit further. And so you have to have this kind of weird trust that something is holding you and something is guiding you. And that usually is the same thing that gave you the idea originally. So it's okay if you believe this idea came to you and that you've been given a gift and that you have a calling on your life. Do you trust that thing to take a small step and know that the next step will be revealed? One of my favorite quotes in the world is action creates clarity. So if you don't know what to do next, what was the last thing you were told to do in your spirit? And usually we know what that is. So I want to start a podcast. I want to be a Joe Rogan. I want to have these big guests. I want to have blah, 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 blah. Cool, Paul. But what is the next thing in your hand?
Right.
What is it? Maybe you just recently connected with somebody who sells microphones and does audio engineering or whatever. That's your task. Don't worry about everything else. And then when you have that conversation, when you buy that microphone, when you set up that meeting with that podcast coach, whatever that small thing is at your hand, it's amazing that the light shines a little bit further and then you're awakened and you know your next step. And so it's this weird blind faith that people have to have. It's actually fun if you think about it. It's scary. It's also fun, but I haven't seen it work any other way.
Interesting. When we build a marketing plan for a client, we used to go back a few years. We used to do the 5-year plan, right?
Yeah.
Because we could, because the world didn't change that fast.
Right.
So we would do a 12-month and a 5-year. Now we're doing 90 days,
Totally.
30-day cycles.
Totally. And it shifts probably during that time too.
And so if you look at the totality of the 90-day plan, the first 30 days is packed out. The second 30 days is lighter. And the last 30 days is even lighter still, because we don't know what the first 30 days is going to bring.
Exactly.
The results are how we're going to tweak or change or whatever. So in that fourth week, that's what we're spending time doing. And then packing out the next 30 days.
Exactly.
Filling that in.
Yep.
And it's along the lines of what you're saying is don't get so far ahead of yourself that you get paralyzed, right? Because you're like suddenly overwhelmed instead of breaking it down into you don't know yet until you've done XYZ, you don't know yet.
Exactly.
So I love that because it takes the pressure off.
Uh-huh.
Just focus on what's in front of you. Can you speak to, I think a lot of times there's a challenge between innovation and creativity and balancing that with the administration or the process or the analytical. A lot of people are uber one way or uber the other way, and just trying to get towards that middle where you can be effective on both sides of that.
A huge part of the creative process is boundaries and restriction. So whenever you work with a professional creative, a musician, someone who's in theater, whatever, there's always lines, there's always boundaries, because if there's not something to create within, then you're actually limiting your imagination. So it's not counter to creativity to be organized and have processes and systems. It's actually the stage in which creativity can actually do its thing. So setting up, actually, let me go back a little bit. Usually, and this is me, everybody has a different process. I've talked to a lot of creatives, people who are in that space professionally, and overwhelmingly, they suggest that whenever you are having an idea, you throw up on paper. There's no limits, there's no whatever, you just see what comes out. You see this Julia Cameron in Artist's Way when she talks about morning pages. It's this stream of consciousness of like all these ideas or whatever. And then there's a time of pruning and coming in and then adding structure. And then there's a time of create. And so it's this wave between process and creativity and process and creativity. And they're not counter to each other. They actually need each other. And another example of this is a house with its beams and the structure. And then after it's over, then you come in and you decorate. One doesn't take away from the other. We both need the same. So it's helpful, obviously, when you can have a team and people who operate more one way or the other. But I think it's important that every member in that team actually respects what the other brings to the table.
Yeah. I have a new book coming out called Write to Thrive, and it's about how to write a nonfiction book in 30 days. And one of the things I really emphasize in the book is about staying in creative flow and not trying to edit as you go.
Totally. Yeah.
It really bogs people down.
Exactly.
What you're talking about in that creative process is just give yourself over to the creative process, stay in creative flow and let it. And you can be critical of it later.
Totally.
It comes later.
Yes.
And that's when you can really critically look and go, what are the best ideas? But if you try and do that all at the same time, it doesn't work. So
absolutely,
full ebb and flow between creativity and critical thinking.
Yeah.
And how it relates to other things. Now, before the show, I told you I noticed that you had Seth Godin on your podcast, and I'm like a huge fan. I have a number of other people that you've interviewed that are just top tier leaders. What's it in interviewing all these really interesting people in business and leadership? What's a recurring theme that kind of stands out to you that seems to come up all the time with each of them?
When I was in my early 20s, I ran a nonprofit. I started one. It was very small. There were 10 to 15 volunteers. We had maybe $1,000 in our bank account, and I was busting my ass trying to get this thing off the ground and make it a thing. And there was a woman in our town who was quite a bit older than me, more experienced, and she ran a similar nonprofit. But she had hundreds of volunteers, tens of thousands of dollars of donations. She was just really killing it. And I just looked up to her so much. So I went to a thing that she was speaking at, and I got an opportunity to go meet her afterwards. And while I was standing to meet her, she didn't realize that I was standing close. And she was talking to her friend. And she had just gotten off stage and she'd killed it on stage. People were laughing, people were crying. Like, she just killed it. But I'm standing there to meet her. She's whispering over to her friend. And I hear her say, "Oh my God, I blew it up there. Oh my God, was that any good? Oh, I shouldn't have said yada yada." And she was just regurgitating all this self-doubt. And I feel bad for her that happened, and maybe it was just a bad day, but I'll never, ever forget it because it proved to me that the people who are doing amazing things have this same internal voice. They have just learned where to put it in their life. And I have seen that over and over again on this show where folks will tell me the same internal issues, internal barriers, but behaviorally, they've learned what to do with it. So my negative, critical, self-doubt self, I can learn to, and I'm working on this with my daughter right now. She's a big feeler. She's very sensitive. And we're working on seeing this emotion, seeing this whatever as a thing outside of yourself that will always be in your sphere and it'll always follow you. But instead of putting it into your heart and taking ownership of it, you can put it to the side and be like, "Yeah, I see you. I notice you. Thank you. Thank you for your input." And the folks that I've interviewed, without a doubt, that has been the case. They have figured out how to put that thing to the side and take imperfect action. And every single one of them has countless stories of failure. Countless. But again, behaviorally, they've learned how to deal with that and not take ownership and make that shape their identity.
And make it a learning opportunity too. Every failure has learning attached to it. At the beginning, Vertical Solutions Media was founded 16 years ago. And at that time, I was homeschooling 5 kids as a single mom.
I was homeschooled.
Right.
Yep.
And so I started, when I went through divorce, I wanted to
Mhm.
continue homeschooling. 4 of my kids are adopted. They had some learning challenges. So it was just the best. I knew it was the best for them and I wanted to keep doing it. The thing that I'm in looking back in retrospect during that time is I didn't recognize how important it was to have a tribe
Yeah.
and how much I could have used a tribe at that time because I was really struggling, but I didn't think I had time to network. I thought that was a waste of my time because I was too busy or network and build that. So how important is it to really have, and I will say I have that now. I have that
Sure.
now. And I try and participate in that community as someone who mentors others too, because now I'm sure they're along in the journey. But what role does the community play in a successful entrepreneur, and how important is it to have a tribe?
It's huge, but also it's hard. It's especially when you're starting off and if you're really taking a hard left turn from the way that you grew up and your current circumstances and you're trying to make changes in your life. The truth is, it is weeks, months, maybe even years before you find yourself in the right tribe. And that can be really discouraging because you hear a lot in these personal development books and so forth, like your tribe is your vibe and you're the equation of the 5 people next to you, or all these quotes, which are completely true. But it's also disheartening when you're like, yo, I'm literally starting from the ground up and I don't have connections and I don't have anything to offer people. I don't even know where to start. So digital mentors were everything to me for the first 5 to 7 years of trying to build something. I didn't have people in my life who I could go to with some of this stuff. So I listen to podcasts, I watch YouTube. That's why I'm so passionate about content creation because there's so many people out there who literally don't have community. And you can have digital mentors. I know this sounds crazy. Napoleon Hill talks about it in his book, Think and Grow Rich, like a visible board of mentors. And there's been I can't tell you how many times I've had to just close my eyes and just be like, man, if Lewis Howes, somebody I look up to, was right here, if Gary Vaynerchuk was right here, if Elizabeth Gilbert was right here, what would they tell me right now? And just because you consume so much content that you know what these people would say to you. And it sounds crazy, but it works. It really works. And the interesting thing about it is through some of those trials of being alone and seeking out mentorship and honestly praying to God and just asking for the right people to appear, eventually it does happen and it's so invaluable. But I just wanted to mention the earlier stages because it's a luxury, it's a privilege, it's an honor, and it's something that's cultivated to build community.
Yeah. And the thing for me when I really recognized the value of the tribe was when I got one. I
Totally.
started going to an association group for women in business in my state, and I got welcomed in by women 15 to 20 years ahead of me in the
So
journey.
cool. So cool.
And there's just so much wisdom, just sitting around, so much wisdom and experience that they're just so willing to give. And so that just made, I was like, why haven't I done this before
Yeah.
now?
Yeah.
I think it's something to encourage people. If you don't have that around you, you don't have that kind of circle, that business, whatever. It doesn't even have to be formal, I don't think.
Totally.
Other business owners do a monthly lunch or things like that, is just have people to talk to about the crazy things that happen as entrepreneurs, people that understand the hustle.
You made a really good point. You said, let's start a blank. Becoming more and more introverted as I get older, which I don't like, but I've noticed that anytime I'm lonely or I need more community or whatever, it's an invitation to start it, which I don't like. But I'm the type I wait for an invitation and it doesn't happen. And it's not because you're bad or wrong or people don't want to be with you. It's people are busy and they're all waiting on an invitation. So again, as a leader, we called it Frappuccino nights years ago. And we opened up our living room and ironically, we made pots of coffee. We didn't have Frappuccino. I don't know why we called it that, but we literally just invited if somebody had a little business. I know we had a lady there who sold dog treats. We had somebody who had a coffee shop. We had photographers there. We had bloggers there. But if there's anybody who I ever met, literally strangers, I'd be like, hey, we have Frappuccino night on Sunday. Every other Sunday, they'd come to our house and we would just talk about our goals and yada. And that was invaluable. But I had to start it and I had to make the pot of coffee because nobody's coming to save you. You literally have to get out there and figure it out yourself. And yeah, this is coming from somebody who naturally wants to be alone in her pajamas.
And I think the thing that you have to shift is a lot of times we think networking is about getting more business. It's about sales. That's not what a tribe is for.
Great point.
So you have to let go of that. Whatever group you're in, you can't walk in there and start selling because people are like, whoa, I just wanted to connect and talk and figure stuff out. So this has been great. As we wrap up, what are some one or two takeaways that you feel are key that entrepreneurs really need to remember after listening to this episode?
Man, what I'm working on right now, I am working on asking for help more. I'm not good at that. I know that's the next stage for me is to be more intentional with reaching out to people, asking questions, getting over my am I bothering somebody mentality. And then also to asking from help from God or people, whatever you want to say, but just that internal system, like I said earlier, of what is the next step for me and really honoring and protecting your quiet time in the morning or whenever your reflection. I really believe all the answers we have deep within us, there's so much stimulus and there's so much noise and our bodies are just in a trauma response right now to everything that's going on. And when we can get calm and still and quiet, there's so much internally that can come up for you. It's amazing. And so I think if any takeaway, it's what I'm working on myself.
I think that just reminds me of the thing that I work on continuously and have for a long time is I have that kind of comfort level with running full out all the time. Like the more stressful the deadline, the better I am. The problem is when life happens, as it tends to do, the unexpected, I have nowhere to expand because I'm already full out.
Yeah.
So then you crash and burn because you've got nowhere to go. And so what I'm learning to live and work within margin.
That's so great.
If I can stay within 80% of my margin, when life happens, it's not an emergency. It's not a crisis because I can expand to deal with it.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. I love that. I'm going to use that. That's great. That's good.
You can have it.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Heather. Where
It's an
can we
honor.
find you, connect with you, learn more about you?
Yeah, at Heather Parady. You can just Google it. You'll find me.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Bethany.